Have you ever wondered what it takes for something ordinary to become sacred? I never thought a faded gray hoodie could change everything. But then again, I never expected to find 3 alien cubs treating it like the most precious thing in the universe. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'd been stationed at the Kepler for to be research outpost for 8 months when she arrived. And nothing about my carefully ordered life would ever be the same. The transport shuttle touched down during the worst dust storm we'd seen in weeks, and through the observation window, I watched a figure emerge from the ramp with the kind of confidence that suggested she'd walked through far worse than red sand and howling wind. Director Hassan met her at the airlock, and I pretended to check atmospheric readings while stealing glances at the newcomer. She was stunning in a way that made you forget to breathe. With long platinum hair pulled back in a practical braid, features that reminded me of old earth paintings, and those eyes, impossibly bright, even from across the room. But it was the pointed ears that gave her away as Celestian, one of the few alien species who looked almost human. She wore fitted tactical pants in deep blue and a cream-colored jacket with subtle armor plating, every inch the professional xenobiologist her file claimed. And when Director Hassan introduced us, her handshake was firm and her smile was genuine. "Marcus, this is Dr. Lyra Vexen," Hassan said. "She's here to help with our contamination problem in Sector 7, I nodded, trying not to stare at how the station's lights seemed to catch a faint luminescence in her skin. "The indigenous fauna breaching our supply storage?" I asked, and she tilted her head, those unusual ears shifting slightly with the movement. "Not breaching," she corrected gently, "seeking refuge. There's a difference." That should have been my first clue that Lyra saw the world differently than the rest of us. The next morning, I found her in the biolab, and that's when I met them. 3 creatures about the size of house cats, covered in soft silvery fur that shifted colors with their mood, currently a nervous purple. "They're Lumina cubs," Lyra explained, her voice dropping to a soothing whisper as one of them chittered anxiously. "Their mother was killed by a sandslide. I found them 2 days ago in the eastern canyons. The cubs had 6 legs, large eyes that seemed to hold far too much intelligence, and small crystalline formations along their spines that hummed with soft bioluminescence. They're beautiful," I said, meaning it, and Lyra's smile transformed her entire face. "They're also terrified. Imprinting on a new caregiver is difficult for Luminas. They need to feel absolutely safe or they won't bond, and without bonding, they won't survive." She'd set up a small habitat for them in the corner of the lab, but the cubs refused to settle, pacing and chittering, their fur flickering between purple and gray. I watched Lyra work with them for hours, her patience seemingly endless, speaking to them in soft tones, offering food they wouldn't eat, creating comfortable spaces they wouldn't use. "What do they need?" I finally asked as the station's artificial evening cycle began. She sighed, running a hand through her hair, exhaustion evident in the set of her shoulders. "Trust, safety, the scent of someone they recognize as pack," she said. "But I'm still practically a stranger to them." The cubs huddled together, their humming taking on a lonely, mournful quality that made my chest ache. "Come on," I said impulsively. "You've been at this for 12 hours. Let's grab something to eat. They'll still be here after you take a break." She hesitated, clearly torn, but finally nodded. "Just for a quick meal," she agreed. The station's mess hall was empty at this hour, and we grabbed pre-packed meals and sat by the large viewport overlooking the alien landscape. "Why xenobiology?" I asked, genuinely curious, and Lyra gazed out at the rust-colored dunes. "Because understanding others, truly understanding them, that's how we build bridges between worlds," she said, then laughed softly. "Also, I was terrible at engineering, much to my father's disappointment." I smiled. "Military family?" She nodded. "Fleet admiral, 3 generations running. I was supposed to be the 4th, but I feign at tactical simulations and cry during war documentaries. Not exactly command material." The vulnerability in that admission made her feel suddenly real in a way that transcended her alien features. "I think the cubs are lucky to have you," I said, and she met my eyes with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We'll see if they agree," she said quietly. When we returned to the lab, Lyra had been carrying my old gray hoodie, the one I'd left draped over my chair, not even realizing she'd picked it up. "Oh, that's mine," I said, but she'd already set it down on her workstation, distracted by checking the cub's vitals. What happened next would become the moment that changed everything. The smallest cub, the one with a distinctive white patch on its chest, suddenly lifted its head, chittering with interest. And before Lyra or I could react, all three cubs rushed toward the chair where my hoodie lay, their fur shifting from anxious purple to curious green. They circled it, sniffing and humming, and then the smallest one grabbed it with its front paws and dragged it into their habitat. Wait, what are they doing? I whispered, but Lyra had frozen, her eyes wide with wonder. The cubs pulled and arranged the hoodie into a small nest shape, then climbed into and around it, their crystalline spines beginning to glow with warm golden light, the color of contentment, of safety, of home. They've never done that before, Lyra breathed. They've chosen it, declared it their nest territory. The cubs settled into the hoodie nest, the largest one positioning itself at the entrance, while the other two curled inside, their humming shifting to a sound like purring. Why my hoodie? I asked, baffled, and Lyra moved closer to observe, careful not to disturb them. Scent, probably, she said. Luminas have incredibly sophisticated olfactory senses. They must find your scent comforting, maybe similar to their mother's pheromone signature. Or maybe, she glanced at me with a slight smile, they just think you're safe. I felt an unexpected warmth at that idea. We watched the cubs for another hour, neither of us wanting to break the spell, and when I finally said I should get some sleep, Lyra touched my arm gently. Thank you, Marcus. I don't know what it is about you, but you've helped them more in one evening than I managed in days. That night, I lay in my quarters thinking about silver-furred cubs, a woman with platinum hair and pointed ears, and the strange magic of an ordinary hoodie becoming something sacred. The next morning, I learned exactly how serious Lumina cubs took their nest territory. I'd arrived at the lab with coffee for both of us, a peace offering for the hoodie sacrifice, and found Lyra sitting on the floor outside the habitat, looking exhausted but amused. Rough night? I asked, handing her a cup, and she laughed. I tried to retrieve your hoodie around midnight, thinking I'd wash it and return it, she said. They formed a defensive perimeter and absolutely refused to let me near it. The largest one, I've been calling him Aegis, stood guard all night, every time I approached. All three would position themselves around the hoodie and their spines would glow red in warning. I looked into the habitat and sure enough, Aegis was stationed at the entrance, eyes alert, while the other two, I mentally named them Nova and Flicker, were nestled in the hoodie, which now looked decidedly worse for wear. They guarded it all night? I asked, something in my chest feeling unexpectedly tight, and Lyra nodded. With absolute dedication, in Lumina culture, the nest is everything. It's safety, family, survival. By claiming your hoodie, they've declared it the foundation of their new pack, she explained, her voice filled with professional fascination and personal affection. So I guess I'm donating it to the cause, I said, and she smiled that transformative smile again. I'll replicate you a new one from the fabricator, she offered, but I shook my head. Keep your credits. I want to see how this plays out. What I didn't say was that I wanted an excuse to keep coming back to the lab. To see her, over the next week, I became a regular fixture in Lyra's workspace, helping with the cubs, learning about Lumina behavior, and falling a little bit more for the brilliant, compassionate alien woman who treated three orphan creatures like they were the most important beings in the galaxy. The cubs thrived, their fur shifting to healthy blues and greens, their crystalline spines growing brighter. And always, they returned to that hoodie, the nest territory they guarded with unwavering devotion. It's remarkable, Lyra said one evening, as we watched them play. They've bonded so quickly, usually it takes weeks. But having that stable nest point, your hoodie, it gave them the security they needed to trust again. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, and Nova had ventured out to investigate her, tiny paws touching her knee, while its fur rippled with curious yellow. Can I tell you something strange? I said, and she looked up at me with those impossibly bright eyes. I've been on this rock for 8 months, doing the same surveys, running the same tests, feeling like I'm just marking time until my contract ends. But this past week, watching you with them, being part of this, it's the first time I've felt like I'm doing something that matters. Lyra's expression softened. That's not strange, Marcus. That's called finding your purpose. Or maybe just finding the right people to share the journey with. The air between us felt charged with something unspoken. And I was about to say something probably stupid and definitely honest, when the alarm blared. Red emergency lights flooding the corridor outside, Director Hassan's voice came over the comm system, terse and urgent. All personnel. We have a Category 4 sandstorm approaching. Lockdown protocols in effect. Secure your stations. Lyra was on her feet instantly, scooping up Nova and calling to the other cubs. We need to move them to a more secure location. This lab has external windows, she said. And I grabbed the emergency kit while she tried to gather Aegis and Flicker, but the cubs were chittering in alarm. And Aegis had planted himself firmly in the Hoodie nest, refusing to budge. Come on, buddy, Lyra urged. But Lumina cubs, I'd learned, were stubborn when frightened. He won't leave the nest, I realized, and Lyra's face showed her dilemma. Outside, the wind was already howling, sand, beginning to pelt the reinforced windows with sounds like bullets. Then we take the nest with us, I said, and carefully, slowly. I reached into the habitat. Aegis watched me, his spines flickering between colors, but he didn't retreat. And when I gently lifted the Hoodie, with both cubs still nestled inside, he gave a small chirp and climbed onto my shoulder, positioning himself like a guardian. He trusts you, Lyra whispered, wonder in her voice. And then we were running, her carrying Nova, me carrying a makeshift nest and 2 cubs, with Aegis riding my shoulder. As the station shook under the storm's fury, we made it to the central shelter, a reinforced chamber deep in the station's core, where a dozen other personnel had already gathered. And I carefully set the Hoodie nest in a quiet corner while Lyra did a quick check of each cub, confirming they were unharmed. The storm raged for 6 hours, and in that time, something shifted. Other crew members who'd dismissed the cubs as Lyra's eccentric project saw them now, frightened babies protecting their nest, depending on us. And when Aegis finally relaxed enough to chirp softly, allowing Lyra to stroke his fur, I saw Hardened Engineer's smile. You're good with them, Dr. Ramirez, our chief medical officer told Lyra, with the cubs and with us. You've been here less than 2 weeks, and you've reminded us why we're out here. Not just for research, but for moments like this. Connection across species. Lyra ducked her head, a faint luminescent blush coloring her cheeks. The cubs did that, not me, she said. But I caught her hand, squeezing gently, and she interlaced her fingers with mine, the simple gesture feeling monumental. When the storm finally passed and we returned to the lab, the cubs immediately rearranged their nest, chattering contentedly, and Lyra turned to me, still holding my hand. I need to tell you something, she said, nervous energy in her posture. The cubs are almost ready for release back into the wild. Maybe another week, and then my assignment here is complete. I'm supposed to return to the homeworld. The words hit me like physical force, and I realized with sudden clarity that the thought of her leaving felt unbearable. What if you stayed? I asked, the words tumbling out. I know you have important work elsewhere. I know I'm just a survey tech on a backwater outpost, but this past week has been. You've been. I struggled to find adequate words and settled for honesty. I don't want you to go. Lyra's eyes shimmered, and for a moment I thought I'd ruin everything. But then she smiled, sad and hopeful at once. I have 3 more assignments lined up across 2 sectors, she said. But none of them feel as much like home as this place has started to. As you've made me feel. She stepped closer, her free hand coming up to touch my cheek. On Celesta, we have a saying. The heart knows its nest before the mind accepts the journey, she said softly. I think my heart has been trying to tell me something. I closed the distance between us, resting my forehead against hers, breathing in the faint scent of her. Something like starlight and growing things. Then listen to it, I whispered, and she laughed, the sound breathless and beautiful. I'm terrified, she admitted. What if I stay and you realize I'm not what you thought? What if I gave up my career plan for something that doesn't last? I pulled back enough to meet her eyes. What if you leave and spend the rest of your life wondering what we could have built together? We stood there, the question hanging between us, while in the background, the cubs hummed their contentment, safe in their nest. The decision came 3 days later, and not from Lyra, but from the cubs themselves. She'd been preparing for their release, teaching them to hunt the small insects that thrived in the canyons, encouraging their independence, and I'd been helping, though every step toward their freedom felt like a countdown to losing her too. We'd taken them to a protected valley, a place Lyra had scouted, with abundant resources and no major predators, and we'd set up a temporary camp to monitor their transition. This is it, Lyra said, her voice thick with emotion. They're ready, healthy, bonded to each other. They'll thrive here. we opened the habitat's gate, expecting the cubs to rush out toward freedom. But instead, Aegis approached me, chittering softly, and pressed his small head against my hand. Then did the same to Lyra. Nova and Flicker followed. A farewell ritual, Lyra explained, her eyes bright with tears. They're saying thank you, she whispered. And goodbye. The cubs moved toward the canyon, their fur shifting to the colors of the stone around them, camouflage and adaptation. But then Aegis stopped, looked back, and gave a single, clear call. The crystalline formations on his spine glowing brilliant gold, the color of joy, of family, of home found and remembered. Then they were gone, 3 small shapes disappearing into their native world, and Lyra was crying, and I was holding her, and something that had been building between us finally broke free. Stay, I said again, not a question this time, but a plea, a promise. Stay, and we'll build something here. Together, research, conservation, whatever you want. I'll help you make it happen. Just stay. She looked up at me, tears tracking down her luminescent cheeks. You'd do that? Change your whole plan, for me, for us? I smiled. You changed your entire career trajectory to save 3 alien cubs. I think I can manage a contract extension and a research proposal. She kissed me then, soft and certain, and it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. Like coming home to a place I'd never known I'd been searching for. There's a saying on Earth too, I said, when we finally broke apart. Home is where the heart is, and my heart is here, with you. Lyra laughed, that beautiful breathless sound, and nodded. Then I guess we're both staying, she said, and in that moment, I understood what the cubs had known from the beginning, that sometimes the most ordinary things, a worn hoodie, a chance meeting, a choice to stay, become sacred not because of what they are, but because of what they represent: safety, trust, the courage to build a nest in uncertain territory and defend it against all odds. We returned to the outpost as twin suns set over the alien landscape, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, and I thought about the journey ahead. The research we'd propose, the life we'd build, the mysteries we'd unravel together, and it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. That night, back in the lab, I found my hoodie cleaned and folded on my workstation, returned from its sacred duty. And tucked into one pocket was a small crystalline fragment, shed naturally from one of the cubs. It hummed faintly with residual light, a gift, a memory, a reminder. Lyra appeared beside me, slipping her hand into mine. They left us a piece of their nest, she said softly. In Lumina culture, it means they consider us family, forever. I turned to her, this brilliant, beautiful, alien woman who'd walked into my life on a dust storm and changed everything. Forever sounds perfect, I said, and I meant it with every atom of my being. The next morning, we began drafting the proposal for a permanent xenobiology research station. Director Hassan listened to our pitch with a knowing smile and approved it before we'd even finished. Apparently, the entire outpost had been watching our story unfold and betting on when we'd figure out what everyone else already knew, that we belonged together. Lyra threw herself into the work with passionate intensity, designing conservation protocols for luminas and other indigenous species, while I discovered a talent for field research I'd never known I possessed. And together, we transformed the outpost from a temporary way station into a real home. Months passed, then a year, and sometimes in the evenings, we'd hike out to the valley where we'd release the cubs. And occasionally, just occasionally, we'd see 3 familiar shapes in the distance, thriving and wild and free, and they'd call to us. Crystalline spines glowing gold in recognition, family acknowledging family across the divide of species and distance. Do you ever regret it? I asked Lyra one evening, as we watched the twin suns set. Staying here, giving up the career you'd planned? She leaned her head against my shoulder, her pointed ears tickling my cheek. Every nest requires sacrifice, she said. But what we've built here, what we've found, this is worth more than any plan I could have made. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling the faint luminescence of her skin warm against mine. Sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need in the most unexpected packages, I said. 3 alien cubs, a hoodie, and a beautiful xenobiologist who walks through sandstorms like they're nothing. She laughed and turned to kiss me. Sweet and familiar and still somehow thrilling. Don't forget the stubborn survey tech who taught me that home isn't a place you find. It's a choice you make, she countered. And I had to agree. She was absolutely right. In the end, The story of us began with the simplest things: a piece of clothing left on a chair, 3 orphan cubs seeking safety, and 2 lonely people finding each other across the vast distances between worlds. And if that hoodie, now preserved in a small display case in our shared quarters with the cubs' crystalline gift, had become something sacred, it was only because it represented a truth we'd learned together. That love, real love, is built in the quiet moments. In the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. In the courage to defend the nest you've built, no matter what storms may come, and in the faith that sometimes, the most extraordinary adventures begin with the most ordinary acts of kindness. Lyra keeps talking about expanding our research to other sectors. Eventually, building a network of conservation stations across multiple worlds. And I know we'll do it together. But for now, I'm content here, in this outpost on this alien world, building a life with someone who sees the universe as a place of endless wonder and treats every creature, human or alien, with compassion and respect. And every time I see that hoodie in its case, glowing faintly with residual bioluminescence from the cubs who claimed it as their own, I smile, because I know exactly what they felt. That moment of recognition, of safety, of knowing you found your place in the chaos of the universe. And I guard that feeling, that love, that home we've built, with the same fierce devotion those 3 small cubs showed through that long night when they declared a simple piece of fabric their nest territory and protected it against all odds. Because some things, some people, some loves, are worth defending forever. And I'd face 1,000 sandstorms to protect what Lyra and I have found together. This beautiful, unexpected, sacred thing we call home.